I think this is also really important, and particularly, for peri and postmenopausal women.
Right.
How can creatine help us with bone health?
So there's been about 15 studies in total. Some are equivocal, others support it, some don't. But the best lines of evidence suggest that in combination with exercise, and I can't stress that enough because there's never been a study where creatine was taken by itself that had bone benefits. So for those listening, make sure exercise is first. And then when you add creatine, about 8 grams seems to be the minimum, so quite a bit higher than what's needed for muscle. 8 grams all the way up to about 12 grams has been shown to decrease bone mineral density loss in the hip, and that was in postmenopausal females. And then in older females as well as males, it seemed to improve bone area and strength. So we don't have hardly any data on perimenopausal, premenopausal females, which is substantially lacking. But in the postmenopausal phases and older adults, and primarily males, it does have some bone benefits. Collectively, though, when you look at all the studies, we can now conclude creatine does not increase bone mineral density. At best, it has a bone preserving effect.
Okay, which is dropping. And it's interesting then, if we did have research, right, around perimenopausal women to kind of get in before you see that drop and that loss in
I think one of the best lines is if we take a young group of primarily biological females, like early premenopausal, measure their bone, then measure them again during the perimenopausal stage and then postmenopause, like a longitudinal study, that would see the effects of aging, hormones, as well as can creatine have a benefit. But to your point, we've done an awful job looking at the age of 40 to 49. We've really looked at older adults, and we'd love to look at young females, 18 to 39, and then another cohort of the perimenopausal transition. That estrogen hormone and progesterone seems to influence creatine a little bit. Ironically, females don't experience the rates of muscle protein breakdown nearly as well as males. And we don't know why that is. It's the only logical reason is maybe estrogen is having an influence there. But I think from a biological sex perspective, we have a lot of data on males, but we don't have a lot on females. And I'm really excited to see that area emerging. And I think it's a main focal point now.
How do you mean there that you don't have the same benefits of muscle protein breakdown?
Yeah, so males seem to decrease protein breakdown way more than females. And what I mean by that is when males take creatine, they sort of decrease protein breakdown, almost creating a more favorable environment for muscle growth. That's in older males and older males and younger males. Females don't experience that breakdown, and we don't really know why. Is it estrogen? Is it other female sex hormones? We just don't know that, and that's an area of future research. So males might respond a bit better than females, but not by a lot. And one of the reasons there, we think maybe estrogen fluctuations are playing a role. Abby Smith-Ryan doesn't really see big fluctuations with the menstrual cycle, but maybe hormones might play a role there.
Okay, so because some of the stuff that I'd heard about and looked into, and like when I'd interviewed Dr. Stacey Sims, is that women are more catabolic and that they shouldn't train in a fasted state. They're more prone to breaking down muscle, and so actually having some protein before. But are you saying that they don't break it down quite as much?
Well, actually, females oxidize more body fat. Males oxidize more muscle protein. So in a fasted state, the female is going to be oxidizing more triglycerides or fat. Unfortunately, for males, they have more protein. They oxidize greater amounts. So females will obviously, when it comes to training, they can train fasted. They don't experience the decrease in protein breakdown on creatine like males do. So therefore,
I see what you're saying. Okay. So creatine doesn't have the same benefits for women. I've got you as
from
in
a protein breakdown perspective,
against breakdown, but maybe they're not having as much breakdown in the first place.
Right. And the other thing is, although both sexes increase lean body mass, males increase a little bit more. Now, the caveat with lean body mass is there's a lot of other tissues, not just muscle. So is it more water retention in males? They might have larger muscle to start with. Is it more fluctuations in blood? So those are areas where when we measure lean body mass, take it with a grain of salt. We need to do a lot more new studies on 3D imaging, MRI, D3 creatine to look at muscle. And there's only a few studies that have looked at muscle biopsies. Yeah.
And when we're looking at measuring bone, is DEXA a good way of kind of sort of estimating how good your bone density is?
Yeah, the majority of studies use DEXA. Now, DEXA is great. The only issue with DEXA is that the standard error of measurement is about 1 to 3%. The problem with bone is, though it does turn over, it takes a very long time. So that's why a lot of bone research is scarce. It's very expensive and takes a long period of time. And to get a 1 or 2% increase in any of our bodies from a DEXA measurement could take years of training. So the caveat is that some of our studies are underpowered, because if there's about a 1 to 3% error in the machine, you need at least that and more to get a treatment effect. So that's why a lot of studies are underpowered, or we usually have a lot of caution saying it showed benefit, it did not overcome the error. Maybe longer term studies are needed there. So that's the problem with bone. Whereas in muscle, you can do a 6-week study and see noticeable effects.
Okay, got you. It's
Yeah.
interesting because I guess for people listening, like I always thought the more that I can build that and the stronger I can be going into perimenopause, the better. And actually
Yes.
in terms of the bone, when I looked at DEXA 2 years ago, it was above the
Yeah.
level, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm interested to go back and see what's
Yes.
happened now.
Yeah, I agree. It's massively important, and start as early as you can. So if there's any females watching and they're 15, 16 or younger, please start lifting weights or doing weight-bearing exercise. Try to build up muscle and or bone as much as you can, because when the body starts to deteriorate, you're going to have a lot more. So therefore you can offset the rate of muscle decline, strength loss, and osteoporosis and osteopenia. So it's never too early to start. Try to get in there and lift things as much as possible. Take the stairs, don't take the elevator, carry the groceries. All these little things add up. The more things that pull on muscle will pull on the bone throughout the day. And so there's a big area called the muscle bone crosstalk. We see muscle or body in the mirror. We never see our bone, but keep in mind, it's a really important tissue that we need to favor and pay attention to.
And do we need to do any kind of plyometric stuff for that, or is just the resistance itself enough?
Resistance is great. Plyometrics is great as well. The more variety, the muscle will respond, but the bone actually responds quite well to load and variety of vectors. So anytime you can do something that's weight bearing to the body, great. Like running on a treadmill will be better than cycling, because obviously the ground force is there. So anything that's weight bearing is going to be beneficial not only to muscle, but obviously bone tissue as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think of my daughter, she's 13 and she's like hugely into gymnastics.
Okay. Yes.
She
Oh,
does
wow.
kind of 6-7 hours of gymnastics a
Yeah.
week. And I think she must be building good muscle and bone.
They have some of the best bone mineral densities across the lifespan and muscle mass. And obviously, because they're always putting weight on the body, holding poses, ground forces. So if you look at bone mineral density and muscle mass in gymnasts, it's very, very high, if not some of the highest.
Interesting. And what about when we get to the point of like, is there a point that we get to where we're now just defending what we have, if you like?
Yeah, unfortunately, around the 40th birthday, that's where the body says, okay, let's sort of change a bit. It really accelerates after the 5th decade. But the biological process of aging, there's clear evidence that sarcopenia, I think a lot of viewers have probably heard that. That's the age-related reduction in muscle mass, strength, and functionality. Coincides with bone-related diseases and frailty. So the 40th birthday onward is where the body starts to deteriorate a little bit. It does accelerate after the 5th decade, and of course, when we get 60, 70, and 80. We don't want that. We want to come up with interventions, ideally non-pharmacological, to make us live longer, free of disease. Exercise has to be number one. You could argue exercise has to be number 1, 2, and 3. Right after that, though, adequate protein. I think still today, a lot of people are not consuming enough quality protein. And then consider creatine, if you can, to give you that synergistic effect of those two interventions. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And do you think things like red light therapy can make a difference to bone?
Not the evidence on all those things seems to be a little questionable until I see randomized control trials. I don't know much about that. So I can't really comment on that per se. I know a lot of people will do it to wake up or for skin health. It's kind of like collagen, but I haven't seen anything on that and bone health, especially. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. You mentioned there for bone health, 8 grams to 12 grams. I'm thinking like the typical, like very typical postmenopausal women is somewhere in the region of 60 kilos. If we went on that 0.1 gram per kilo, that would only be 6 grams. So you're saying they can actually go above that if they're trying to protect bone health?
Our best study was 2 years, and we gave postmenopausal females 0.14 grams. So that equated to about 11 to 12 grams a day for 2 straight years. No adverse effects on the kidney or liver, and it had improvements on improving lean body mass, preserved bone, and increased bone strength. Now, people say, wow, that's a lot higher than I've ever heard. And keep in mind, our knowledge has evolved from the 3 to 5 grams for just muscle. Now we're talking about bone, and of course, brain is a different story altogether. But if you are taking a higher amount than 5, please note it's likely you can divide that up into smaller dosages. So I personally take about 10 grams a day at least. And I put 5 in my breakfast. I usually have Greek yogurt and whey protein. And then I'll put 5 in a water bottle and drink that when I'm working out. So there's an easy way to get 10 grams in the day. And I don't notice any adverse effects like GI tract or things like that. Could I take 10 at once? 100%. You could take 20 or 30 if you want. But just do what's consistent for you. I think if a listener's saying, okay, I'm interested in starting creatine, I wouldn't recommend to start maybe at 10. Maybe start with 3 to 5 grams, see how you do tolerate it. You could divide that up into maybe 2.5 grams in the morning, 2.5 grams later. Come up with a nice, slow, progressive strategy to make it more consistent. And hopefully they're considering it, taking it on a daily basis for the benefits, not only for exercise, but health benefits there as well.